All right, welcome into a Vegas Squares snippet. In this snippet, we will be discussing NBA basketball with Tony Johnson here, and there has been big news out of Philadelphia and Minnesota. Jimmy Buckets, also known as Jimmy Butler, four-time NBA All-Star, has been acquired by the 76ers in a deal with the Timberwolves. Jimmy Butler has made it known for some time that he has not been a fan of the Minnesota Timberwolves front office, back office, on court, the city in general. I got Tony Johnson with me here in studio, and let me just go over the full-blown trade here. It's Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton head to Philadelphia, and in exchange, Minnesota will acquire Jared Bayless, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and a 2022 second-round draft pick. Initial thoughts for me, who doesn't follow basketball quite as much as you do, is there is a formidable big three brewing in Philadelphia now. And Minnesota is back to Kevin Love 2.0 in the version of Karl Anthony Towns.
Or Kevin Garnett of.
Or there you go. I guess Kevin Garnett 3.0.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, I mean, your initial thoughts, I think, are actually pretty good. I can't argue anything you just said. You got to give this an A+, certainly to Philly. This was a great move, and I think it was one of those. And Elton Brand, the new GM for Philly, has already talked about this. How he wasn't really involved. They didn't want to involve themselves in the whole Jimmy Butler thing. They didn't not only think it was possible per se, but it just wasn't something that made a whole lot of sense with what they would probably have to give up. And then as the weeks and days pressed on, and Jimmy made it, as you said, very well known what he wanted to do, it just sort of materialized, and it's. Again, a long time to go here for Elton Brand, and who knows what will happen. But this was a very, very veteran type of move that a GM would make here. Just kind of wait it out, let some deals go through, and then pick up the pieces when they absolutely had to get rid of him, and they were getting pressure from ownership, from what I understand. Tibbs was to deal him, and this was fantastic. So, getting to the Philly side, I guess more specifically, is that they upgrade in a couple of spots, I think. The main one that's really easy to look at is the big upgrade on defense, especially as a wing defender. So when we look at what they've given up, Covington and Saric and Jared Bayless, who is more of a fill-in type of player, the other two are starters.
He's a piece that gets put in every trade.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Yeah, you mentioned that too. Yeah, 3 teams in 2 years, and he's just a guy. He's going to be involved in these types of moves because he's not ever going to be a game-changing player at all, and much less.
He's got a friendly contract.
Yeah, it's an easy one to move around.
Now let me ask you this before you get it. You're talking about Philadelphia.
Sure.
And I know this is much more prevalent in the new era of the NBA because, well, it just seems like with the formation of super teams and with the ability to handcuff a franchise, these trades, once a player's ready to go, he's ready to go, and there's really nothing Minnesota can do about it or other teams. I liken this to the Le'Veon Bell situation. It felt like, Butler holds Minnesota so handcuffed and accountable that the owner was just like, fuck it, just get rid of him at this point. It matters much more in the NBA, obviously, than it does in the NFL. And I'm not saying that just because of what we've seen with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there's 53 guys versus 12. Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, Minnesota's almost falling back into a team that probably will not compete for the NBA playoffs. Actually, if I had to pick a team right now, because I don't care about the NBA so much, I feel like as a dog, I want Minnesota to just make the playoffs and maybe even do better than Philadelphia, which probably won't happen. The East is probably a little bit more wide open now with Philadelphia. Basically, they've probably, in your opinion, or at least in my opinion, have become even with or better than probably the Bucks and the Raptors, maybe. I don't know a lot about the NBA, but
yeah, I know that's the tough part about it. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to portray my opinion as expertise, but
absolutely.
I mean, I feel like Kawhi and Lowry over the long stretch aren't as good as these three as a combined effort. I think individually these three stars have flaws and inefficiencies, but coming together, I think this team is poised for getting past the second round.
These are interesting points. They really are, and you said a lot in that piece, so it's hard to digest.
My bad.
All of it. No, this is good.
Digest what you need to digest.
This is great stuff.
I mean, 3 top 20 players? Maybe.
I'm with you.
Maybe.
No, I'm with you, and I think you correctly brought up the teams that matter the most. They were looking at what's going on, and although Boston struggled a little bit this season, wins and losses wise, they still have a powerhouse team. And you mentioned Toronto, and I think upstart Milwaukee, which has looked really, really, really good so far this year. I think Philly saw themselves a little bit on the outside looking in, and that was also what helped propel this move, is that they know they're going to have to be able to compete with especially Toronto and Boston. I think that they took a real look at it, that they are not nearly as good as those two teams before this move. They still may not be. That's certainly an argument that we'll have, and a good discussion we can have as the days go forward. But I think they felt like they needed to do something. And as getting back to the defensive side, which goes back to your point, they're not able to do as much, compete as much, especially when they have to go play some of those Western teams during the regular season, that they can't play defense against these guys. They're going to give up too many points, and they did that. They already played some Western games this year, and they gave up an average, I think it was like 125 points on those games. That's just too much. They're not going to be able to score enough.
Right.
Unfortunately, Ben Simmons, is as good of a player as he is, he's still not going to be a great scorer. He'll never be an elite scorer. That's just not part of his makeup, and so they're going to have to get points from somewhere else. And I think this is what it goes to, is that Robert Covington and Saric they're not great defenders, especially Saric. Saric is a scorer. He's a classic European long shooting scorer, and his contract is also relatively big too. So I think the other added to this part is that he's going to have to get paid at like 16 or 17 next year,
Saric?
I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was just too much for what it is. Whereas they're paying J.J. Redick, I think, even less. A longer deal, but even less. And he's still a better spot shooter than Saric is. So Saric is younger and obviously longer and can do more. But still, I thought that was part of an issue. And Covington is always just going to be a spot shooter and an offensive player. He's not a terrible defender, but that is when he was in the D League and moving up in his career, he was doing it by shooting lights out. So I think that's really where it comes down to, is a lockdown defender, one of the best defenders of our generation here as a wing defender, Jimmy Butler, no question about it. And I think the other thing is he's a player that very well may be motivated to play with this, as you said, a great young core group of players, like another big three, big-time tandem. You know, they're expected to give him a full deal in the summer. This year, Ben Simmons will get a pretty much a max deal in the next 2 years. I think in 2 years is when he'll be up, and they'll certainly give him a max. Embiid is already making big money. So, yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a thing here. The only thing I question, and there's two things here, would be the being a quality teammate. There's obviously Butler has had some issues, certainly in the Chicago and Minnesota locker rooms, getting along with players, getting along with management, coaching, as you said. And I think for sure this season he'll be really high end. I think he was, as you said, really happy to get out. He's going to be on his, quote, best behavior, and I think it'll be a really good situation there. The second thing has to go down to the actual game. And floor spacing and being able to move in and around on the floor on the offensive side could be an issue, just because Ben Simmons moves a lot. As an offensive player, he takes a lot of mid-range shots, and that's pretty much exactly what Buckets is. And he takes also he's got a very strong mid-range game, and he moves in and around off a lot of screens. He's constantly in motion on offense. And I think now going from a guy like that versus more spot-up shooters and guys that run really well in kind of a strict system, Covington and Saric, I think that'll be something we'll see unfold. I'm not saying it won't work itself out. It's just something to note. So that's the only thing I can think of there.
Well, I'm looking at Covington and Saric's stats here, and Covington played just short of 300 games in 4 years with the Sixers. And you talked about an upgraded defense. I mean, I'm looking, again, this is just on face value. Covington was first team all defense last year.
Yeah, he got better last year. He was always an average defender. He got better last year. There's Covington and being, I think, more of a quality team defender, whereas you now get a lockdown on ball defender.
Okay, and looking at this, I mean, Covington averaged during his time in Philadelphia averaged 13 points a game, and during his time in Philadelphia, Saric averaged almost 14 points a game. So theoretically, you're giving away 27 points a game in favor of, I believe, 22 or 23 career. for Jimmy Butler. I know that the obviously the one player collectively is better than the two. I don't know. I wonder if Butler was the right move here for this spot.
Well, I think you expect JJ Redick to play more and to upgrade and score more as well. So I think you're going to expect other players to pick up the pieces, if you will, more in a sense there. So I agree that if you look at those just on the face value, yes. But Philly also certainly has some other strong players in the roster, and it almost felt like there was some expendability there. Obviously, we can talk about Markelle Fultz. He's been brought up a lot after having pretty much been left
Where's
for
he
dead.
playing now? Is
almost.
He playing the two?
Yeah, basically, he almost has to, just because of how.
I heard he's not been very great.
No, he has not. He has not been. So the problem is, and he basically had to relearn how to shoot, and it's been a very, very tough road.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, you got the number 1 pick in the draft and then the number 2 pick in the draft, who both had to relearn how to shoot.
Yeah.
What is that?
Unbelievably remarkable.
What does that say? I mean, does that really say that we just put? And I feel like basketball as a whole, talent-wise, just fundamentally is garbage. I mean, you have the number 1 and number 2 pick who can't shoot a basketball. Rajon Rondo was another high draft pick, and this is a long time ago. Right. Couldn't shoot a basketball.
Right. Yeah.
It feels like a lot of these players who come in have multiple inefficiencies, and they're not given the time to develop. I mean, we're already labeling Markelle Fultz well, maybe not Lonzo, but we're already labeling Markelle Fultz a bust, and it's been a year and a quarter.
Sure. Well, he had a really, really bad injury, so I mean, I think that's part of the reason, and also added to that he doesn't appear to have been mentally dealing with it very well. So I think it gets back to how strong mentally you are, and different guys are in different ways. And the Rondo, I don't think it's very fair at all to put him in the same category, because Rondo was never a great shooter. He was never a scorer at any point in his career in college or anywhere.
That.
So I mean, he's still an elite passer and been one of the best point guards of our generation. Like, hands down. I mean, Rondo is one of the better players in that sense. Offensively, we're talking about.
Okay, so I'm looking at the starting 5. You got Butler, Embiid, Fultz, Redick and Simmons at this point?
Would be my guess.
Or
yes.
Amir Johnson.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, Amir could start.
Redick off the bench.
Landry Shamet has been playing actually a pretty decent amount now. He's getting a lot better. Another young player.
McConnell.
Seeing more play, yeah. McConnell, I think, is always going to be sort of a bench a guy.
Right. Oh, I mean, obviously, he's not going to overtake Ben Simmons.
But they've been pretty pleased with how well Shamet has played. Now, in I believe his 3rd year of his career, he's finally getting some minutes. So, yeah.
I'm just not sure I see the depth on this team.
No.
I see the talent. I just
no, there's no depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally. You're seeing correctly.
I think that matters against teams like Boston, and I'll have to look at the other teams. But I mean, against teams like Boston, just in Boston in general, like,
right.
Look what happened to them last year. They were 4-1. I mean, they got ousted 4-1, and Boston just seemed to play such a better brand of basketball.
And Boston got better. I think they got better with now the health of Hayward and the younger players now that are
Hayward and Kyrie's back.
Yeah, and Kyrie being healthy. Yeah, I think that you can't. So there's nothing you can do about that. You can't play defense against what the other teams are doing. I think the best offense that they can come up with, and I'm not saying offense in the literal sense, but the best thing they can do is try to get as many really high quality players together and try to run them out in a short series.
Run them out in the gym.
Yeah, I think that's the thought process that Philly is having, and they're pretty confident that they can get Jimmy to work well with the other 2 guys that are clearly the face of the franchise. Embiid and Simmons are the face of this thing going forward for many years. That is my guess, and you get a chance to get a great all-star, top-notch player with buckets. You take it. You take it when you don't have to give up, any major pieces of the puzzle. And I don't think that Covington or Saric are major pieces. I'm glad you brought the fact that Covington has been a better defender, and that is certainly worth something. But they're not major pieces, and I think this just works out really well. We haven't even talked really on the flip side, although you briefly did mention how Minnesota looks like they are a team that had a chance to at least hang around, be a lower playoff seed, win some games, get in the 40s.
Not no more.
I don't think there's any chance. Not any chance. Now it becomes the Wiggins show, which
now it becomes when is Karl Anthony Towns going to leave now?
Yep, when he leave, when will Tibbs get fired? Probably at the end of the season. I know they had thought about it this summer. It's been a complete disaster.
Wasn't part of the reason they brought Tibbs in was to coincide with Jimmy Butler.
Continuity, yeah, exactly. It's been the exact opposite. He's been just like he was in Chicago, domineering, unchangeable, and trying to win at all costs today and not think about anything tomorrow. You playing Wiggins 40-something minutes a game that he got in this first season 2 years ago was just ridiculous. I mean, completely ridiculous. Like, he doesn't manage minutes well. He doesn't manage players well. He's just not any good in that sense. He's an X's and O's fiend, and there's no question that he is great in that sense. But he doesn't know how to run an organization and run a team very well. Why was he an assistant coach? Maybe for 20 to 30 years. Well,
I was kind of hoping he'd go back to Boston.
We're seeing why. We're seeing why he never became a head coach for 20 plus years, despite the great accolades that were always praised.
Well, it's because the league's changed. That type of coach doesn't mesh anymore with players who, frankly, a lot of times it doesn't seem like they even follow schemes anymore.
Well, I disagree with that. I think the scheming is so good and at such an elite level that you're getting a different type of player. And I think there's a lot of players now, more than we've ever seen actually, that are so good in these schemes. And there's so many great NBA coaches around. He's just not one of those great coaches. But there are a whole handful of guys that are unbelievable. There's the scheming and coaching and the detail in this league is second to none. I don't know anything about hockey, so I can't really speak about that. But it's in all the other sports, second to none. It's incredible what these guys are able to do and accomplish. And there's so many great coaches now. There are only maybe a very small handful. You could maybe count guys like Pop, and others on a one hand. And now there's 10. Maybe I don't know. I haven't thought about it or counting it recently, but there's 10 guys that are just really, really, really good, and you're getting a lot of players from different parts of the world too. It's another great thing another thing that isn't talked about that much. How many great European players there are? How there are a small handful of quality South American players. Getting a lot of guys from Australia now. We're starting to get more players from Asia as the time goes on. So it's truly a really elite league, and I think watching this unfold is amazing. I don't like, as you said, you've talked about these groups of great players playing together, and the best get better and the worst get worse sometimes, and that has happened a little bit, and that's a problem. I'm not saying it's all,
I don't hate it. It's just the fact of the matter is I don't like the theoretical mindset that Jimmy Butler has taken, and I'm hard pressed to find another guy right now at this. Well, Kawhi Leonard, I'm still of the old school mentality. You signed a contract, you honor it. And there's a situation where now it's like you wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day and you want out of a franchise. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not okay with that.
Okay, that's a very fair assessment. I agree with you.
But the NBA has mostly, for at least my life and even before that, has been dynasties. I mean, you have the Lakers and Celtics, you have the Bulls, you have the Lakers, you have the Spurs, you have the Heat, and you have the Warriors. I mean, my life has been dynasties, and that's part of the reason. I wouldn't say it's part of the reason I've been turned off by the NBA. Gambling has been another reason why. Maybe it's because I suck at it, but I don't know. Just overall, NBA has really turned me off. And I'm not trying to I don't want to downplay this snippet. It's just, to me, it seems like the less players with a sport with less players. And I don't disrespect player control, or player, availability, because I don't think that they should be just controlled by this domineering thing, even though that my favorite team, the Patriots, seems to have that mentality. It seems that the players have too much in this one, in my opinion.
Interesting. Wow.
They have too much power over this league, in my opinion. So that's what kind of turns me off in that spot. But nevertheless, I still follow it on the surface level, and we got Jimmy Butler, who's now a Sixer. Anything about Justin Patton? I mean, he's a first-round pick. He was number 16 last year. Is there anything?
Long way to develop. I've seen him a little bit in passing. I don't have much of an opinion on it. I don't follow guys in college or in previous time coming into the draft. I don't follow that at all. So, yeah, I know very little, but he's got very limited minutes before and now will also be not seeing the floor very much. So
just because Elton Brand in this article that I'm reading really had a lot of things to say, a lot of good things to say about Patton. So maybe you're right. If he develops right now, he could be another piece to the puzzle.
Possibility down the road. That's right. Yep. So we'll see. I don't know.
What's Butler's contract status? Is he?
So it's up at the end of this season. So there's a theoretical
rental option right now.
Yeah, handshake-ish deal in place that I think that Philly, as long as things don't become sort of a disaster for whatever reason, they are very much planning on giving him a large deal in the summer next year. So that's the thought. He wanted to have some sort of close to a guarantee that there would be that, and I think he got that.
Well, and the thing is no matter what you really believe, he is a top 20 player in the NBA right now. Why would you let him walk?
Yeah, they should have done all of this before. And then again, we can talk about how badly Minnesota screwed this up. They should have. This all should have happened last year.
I'm talking about Philadelphia.
Oh, Philly. Oh, yeah.
You're not going to not offer him a deal.
Nope.
Even if I believe things hit the fan in Philadelphia, they're still going to put one on the table for him.
Yep. And now they've guaranteed themselves, barring massive injuries, to their great players.
They've guaranteed themselves at least a second round at this point.
That they will be around, and this is I just think it's a good move for them. And Minnesota is a disaster, and my guess will do the full clean house at the end of the season. I don't think there's any question about that, and not that things will get better. They've had the same owner since the Garnett days.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just.
But it seems like teams like that are just stuck, mired in mediocrity because. One, they're in Minnesota. What superstar really wants to go there? I mean, I always, it's always kind of funny to see because the super teams are in unexpected places. The Golden State one, that seems to be more of a built super team than the others. But like Miami, obviously, why wouldn't you go to Miami? I mean, obviously, Dwayne Wade was already there.
Right.
Who are some other super teams?
Well, OKC's been pretty good for a while.
Yeah.
And that's a relatively random
That was
spot.
a relatively built. That was built, though. The ones that you have that are super teams in those odd spots are built.
I see what you mean.
The bought ones seem to tend to be. I mean, you could say Kobe and Dwight in the LA Lakers when we thought Dwight was going to be something. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so, anyways, nevertheless, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because, like you said, they traded for a top 20 player, but they still may be fourth best team in the league in the East. So
they might be. Although I think this will take them up into the Toronto, Boston realm, and it'll be.
They may not be better than them, but they may be able to compete.
I agree. I think this makes the East a lot more fun, especially towards the top. This will be a lot of fun, and these teams can play. We've seen early on this season. I know it's very early. I understand that, but we've seen early on that these Eastern teams are playing pretty well against the good West teams. Milwaukee just handled Denver with ease on the road last night. That's an impressive win. So, we'll see going forward. But I like it. I like how it sets up. It's good to see a player come to the East and not go the other way around. So the East get better.
It always seemed like, why would you go to the West? I mean,
yeah.
Why would you go to the harder division? I mean, I get LeBron. That seems more of a life after basketball thing. But
yes.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to go to the East at this point? I mean, with Golden State, you're like, I'd like to play in the finals.
Agreed. Totally agree.
All right. Well, anyways, this has been another Vegas Squares snippet. Jimmy Butler is a Philadelphia 76er.